big advertiser of the fights. I used to listen to the fights all the time. My dad took me up to where Jeffries Barn, Jim Humphreys, I think his name was. He's a world champion. And he had a barn up in San Fernando Valley.
World champion boxer?
Yeah, up in San Fernando Valley, where he held fights. And those guys would fight in those days till you couldn't fight anymore, you know. When you couldn't answer the round, the fight was over. You'd get knocked down, you'd get back up and fight.
Was it 3-minute rounds and 1-minute break?
I don't know. I don't remember. They had a lot of rounds, so they just kept going till one guy called it quits. And sometimes I think the rounds would end only after a guy fell down. They had to drag him back and put him on a stool. But Humphreys fought.
So it wasn't like a 3 count? Like
oh, no.
Or a count to 10 and
no.
It's over? It was...
Oh, yeah, you'd count a guy out. He'd get knocked. I don't know whether he could come back or not. They fought by the Queensberry rules, but that had where you couldn't kick a guy in the groin,
right.
gouge his eyes out. But they fight and fight and fight. Now, Jeffries Barn, I saw fights up there, and I saw Humphreys. I don't think I ever saw Humphreys fight. I think I saw. No, God, I don't think Sharkey would have been fighting at that time. I think that was before his time. Jeffries, oh, it wasn't Humphreys, Jim Jeffries. It was the Jim Jeffries Barn. But there was a fighter named Humphreys there somewhere in the list that I recall the name. But this barn was Jim Jeffries. It was just a regular barn turned into a place where they had a ring. I think it was on the outside. Maybe it was inside. I don't remember it very well. I was so young that I couldn't remember it well. Did I add in there about the time when I was 14? I think 14 or 15, and I went out to Cloverfield and saw the German Ace You Dead. Was that in one of the tapes before this?
The guy that flew upside down?
Yeah.
Real close to the ground?
Yeah, I guess we did talk about that. That was a memorable event, too. But going to the fights was memorable, because even later, my dad and I, for a long time until, I was older then, we used to listen to the fights. Joe Louis. I think I listened to every fight he ever had.
Wow.
That was on the radio. Then later in TV, watched him on TV. My dad was a big fan of the fights.
Well, you still watch the fights, don't you?
Huh?
You still watch them sometimes?
I haven't recently, but yeah, until
for a while you would
a year or so ago, I'd watch the Friday night fights, and for a long, long time.
It's such a crooked industry. It's not much fun to watch.
Oh yeah, it was always crooked,
Yeah, I guess it probably was.
And I don't think it was never honest. They just used to fight harder, so. But then the rounds, a championship fight was always 15 rounds.
Yeah, I know that. I remember
that. In recent years, they've cut it to 12.
Right.
And they got the promoters are all crooked, and I guess they were crooked then, but we didn't realize it how bad they were. But they'd get beat up, and it was fun to watch. My dad never watched much TV. I don't think. The fights, I guess he watched some football, but as far as other stuff, he never paid much attention to TV. He was not a big reader either. He had a hard time writing, I think he left school when he was maybe he went as far as the 8th grade, when his father died, and then in New York, and his mother died when he was born, and he had to go to Arizona and live with his uncle. And his cousins went on to college, but he stayed there and worked his way to pay for his room and board, and he never got any more education.
But he could read.
Oh, he could read and he could write. He had a hard time writing, though. I mean, he didn't have a very beautiful. Now, my mother, she wrote beautifully till she died in '94. Her penmanship was still. She never got a wobbly hand like. But she wrote a lot of letters. She wrote letters until she died. She wrote maybe a letter a day. She kept in touch with a whole lot of people through letter writing. All her relatives, the friends she had made over the years. Friends that my dad used to visit. They used to come and visit him a lot when I was a boy. And we did some visiting. He had a lot of friends most of them at work, but in the neighborhood. We'd visit. My mom and dad would play cards. They played a lot of poker. That's about, now when they were just when he'd go with the guys, he'd play a lot of pinochle, you know, just three-handed, four-handed pinochle. Then he played a lot of cribbage. He and I used to play cribbage a lot when I got older. He was quite a good card player. But he never had a lot of projects, you know, as such.
He had a workshop there. Some
yeah,
tools.
he had a workshop, and he fixed everything. But I used to laugh. If he wanted to put something on a car, he didn't worry about how it looked. Man, he'd drill a hole or chop a hole in the pit and put something through and bolt it so he could bolt it, you know. He was never one for keeping his car super polished and clean and neat. They were used to getting you from A to B.